And we're back, and we're moving into our second conversation for this morning as we talk about the impact of COVID-19 specifically on the education sector. We have with us, joining us for this conversation, a lecturer from the University of Belize, Fermin Olivera. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Isani, Marlene. Good morning. It's good to be here.
I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen you.
I know it's been a long time since I've seen anyone, to be honest with you.
All right, Fermin, this is such a critical conversation for us to have. And I want to just start off with how you were able, as a lecturer, to close off your academic year with your students when the schools had to abruptly close on March 20th.
What can I say? We had to maybe be intuitive a little bit. I think on one part, I was keeping abreast of the international media, Al Jazeera, what was going on in the world. And I think so that helped me prepare. I had the opportunity to meet students leading into the closing, how difficult things could turn out. We are not sure of those implications in the long term. So we could do a little orientation, kind of create a way forward if you think about it. And we took it from there. It's kind of like, what do? You swim or you sink. And we're very, very fortunate that the adjustments we made to the course, to how we're going to meet, and the use of technology. I think the biggest positive aspect that I faced as a lecturer was the small numbers of students in my class. It just happened to be. So we didn't do too bad. But yeah, we had to anticipate a couple things, and I think I was very fortunate, along with my other colleagues.
Yeah.
As a lecturer, you have students who come from different backgrounds. Some who have access to internet, for instance, and some who may have had challenges to access based on their geographic location, or maybe in some instances their socioeconomic situation. In terms of the adjustments that you had to make to accommodate your students, what was that like? Was there a sort of a transition from being in the classroom setting to now being able to do things virtually?
You know, the awareness that a number of students did not have the equipment necessary to continue online education came about maybe some weeks into that shutdown. There was a literal pause. Everybody was sent home. There was little information as to what we needed to do. You start sending out emails. Some people are not responding. Then it kind of became aware that a number of students did not have the wherewithal to be able to do that. So decisions were made in both directions. What do you do if somebody is completely cut off? I can tell you right now, there's still people that are, well, maybe not right now, they're able to move. But it made it difficult, including a little bit sad. We use a couple, those relationships, those other informal means, if you think about it, who knows who, to try and get messages out. But yes, the sad reality is that a number of students, as a matter of fact, a number of faculty, did not have the wherewithal to be able to make a smooth transition. That became a reality very quickly. So it has been challenging.
Yeah, there was a lot, I think, to learn from what became a massive migration to online platforms, and some were ready and some weren't. I think even one parent had pointed out, listen, even if we do have a laptop and internet access, I have to work from home, so my child can't use it to be doing his schoolwork because I need to work. So, I mean, there are little considerations that people never considered, but it was a steep learning curve for all. But I want to bring it back to present day, and let's talk about the recommendations that have been put forward? You clearly said that you had been monitoring what was taking place globally. And similarly
Yes.
with education, there's a lot of information available about what's taking place globally, in how schools reopen. In fact, a lot of universities have just decided to go full online next semester. And some other schools have looked at shift schedules, they've looked at spacing, extended school years. Talk to me about the recommendations that have been put forward from the Ministry of Education and your perspective on what's being proposed.
Well, let me say this, that, for example, I have a son that is in the education system at the primary school level in Taiwan. And I've been consulting with him. They never did close down. They adjusted certain measures. And of course, when I balance that or see that with what other jurisdictions have done that were really, really impacted by COVID, there is no recipe, there is no one formula. These formulas have to be specific to the culture, to the people, to the context.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we want to see or want to find that answer that's out there, but there is no answer for us out there. We need to be the orchestrators of what will work for us. For us at the University of Belize, I can say that we are fully vested in doing online, some aspect of online. Clearly, there are some courses that will lend themselves better to an online platform. There are others that have different components. Those have to be tweaked. Those have to be addressed as on a needs basis. And it's really not a matter of if we will do this. It's how we will do it. I think university education can be very different, or is probably very different from early childhood or primary school, secondary school, that kind of thing. Yeah. I sense, and I could be completely wrong here, that there might be a resistance to online education. But I think if whatever reality we come to, if we come to terms with something, then we are better prepared to move in those directions. As to, for me, I had a sense of what courses can go online, and I think 90 or 95% of our courses can go online. We can tweak others in some other way, but there is no one size fit all. It will be a matter of, let us see our context. When I think about the primary school, I'll be honest with you, there will be an enormous challenge of how that will be worked. I like to think in terms of options. For example, I think it is a very real and possible option to support homeschooling for younger kids. Why not? Maybe that wasn't on the plate a month ago, but we need to rethink our capacities and create options for people. Anybody can mandate for school to be open, but really and truly, and I need to be crude here, it would take kind of foolish parenting to know that there is a grave risk out there. And because there is a rule that you need to go back, that you will send your child to school, I think we need to come to terms that we are the orchestrators and we need to play a more significant role in our own affairs.
Let's stick up in there momentarily, Fermin. Okay. Let's go back a bit. I'll come back to this point that you're making, that ultimately the onus is on the parent, but let's go back a bit. In terms of your students, did you notice a drop in performance level during that shift from being in the classroom setting to meeting online to do classes? What did you observe in terms of their overall performance?
I will have to be the first to admit, Isani, that the performance level just did not drop among students. I'll be the first to recognize that there was a performance reduction even on me, and I can only speak for me. There is the context, there is a certain level of uncertainty. Yeah. And you have to navigate your other roles outside of being a teacher or a lecturer. But it's that insight that allowed me to be able to create flexibility. If I, as a maybe halfway functioning adult that has some resources, I could only empathize with what might be going on. I know a little bit of the context of our students. Performance, let us be honest, if we were to think that performance wouldn't be reduced, then it might be unreasonable. I know performance reduced. I can tell you for a fact that you had to figure ways to cut and to trim those things that there was no plan for. In my case, I had to figure how indispensable is this learning outcome? Can I do away with it? And that's what was necessary. Students were I am sure, and they might be the best ones to talk about this, but I had to see what role could I play to provide some consistency, some level of reassurance, but I had to accept that it couldn't be. Right now I am writing end of semester course reports, and it's there. How much was cut, and what does this mean? So yes, for me and for my students, performance was reduced, and I might add, having the great fortune to have some very, very, very extremely bright students who, we weathered the storm. Let me put it that way.
And that's also, but we do also have to put it in context of where your specialization is. You have a master's in social work, and I know that you work in the social work department as well. So naturally, given your training and your education, you are far better equipped to understand the psychology behind what people were experiencing during this time. Do you think that was across the board for all other educators?
I wouldn't want to speculate, Marlene, but let me say nothing is ever the same for everyone. I am also the chair for the social work program.
Yes.
So you're privy to lots of information coming from students from every direction, concerns, cares. From the concerns, these were legitimate matters. And I got a sense that maybe some of this is not filtering through. Remember, we have some directives coming from the university towards us. We have some concerns by students. So I have to agree or believe that in some areas, in some probably smaller or significant areas, there wasn't a very true and real integration of what was happening on the ground. So clearly we have to intervene and take those measures that will make us compliant with the law. We need to reduce the possibilities of students contracting or getting infected, things like that. So, but yes, going back to what you said, I'm very fortunate that part of my training does allow for thinking critically on many aspects of what we do. So you have to cut your losses. So yes, on a personal note, I am still not sweating this very seriously. I think our sweating will start here pretty soon with the financial implications on COVID on all of us.
Yeah.
So let's go back a bit now.
Okay,
or move forward, if I may. Okay. Where you were discussing earlier the fact that notwithstanding a date has been set for the reopening of schools, in this case we're looking at August 10th as the opening date for the new academic year, that ultimately parents still have that decision to make as to how they go about, having their children re-assimilate in the classroom setting physically. Why do you take that position, in the sense that you have persons out there who perhaps are willing to take a chance on their children to say, well, we'll put them back in school because normalcy has to be, maintained, and we have to revert back to what we deem to be normal, versus, okay, you know what, there is an existential threat against my child contracting this virus in a second wave or subsequently, and I as a parent need to make a decision as to whether or not my child will be homeschooled until I'm able to safely say that he or she is over that particular threat, or you take the risk nonetheless and leave it up to the education system for it to work.
Well, yeah, well, maybe, yeah. Let me say this. The disruption. I think that becomes the central theme when we in our moving forward. How do we minimize disruption, or what other track we can create so that we can easily make or with some relative ease make a transition? I was just kind of suggesting, there is no mood for celebration. This is not over yet.
Yep.
I think we have done fantastic this first round. But this isn't until vaccines or something comes up. It will be with us. Can you get this to treat like malaria? Many things we don't know. I think that going forward needs to be, how do we maybe put in measures that will give us some semblance of control, and then also to reduce the disruptions. Because I traveled in Mexico I was born in Corozal, been there. You know that this tele way of teaching of school, this is I don't know. This is so many years old in Mexico. It's nothing new. I think we need to, and when I say this, and I hope, and I really mean this, not because there is some dictum to do certain things. We need to have the capacities to make those decisions, and also to contribute to the dialogue in finding solutions. So I would think it would be completely counterintuitive for a parent to knowingly take that enormous risk if the circumstances were to change. I can tell you that maybe this right now is a great time to go back to school. I don't know. But if we were to see increasing numbers and things, clearly everything will get paralyzed. Clearly everything will get disrupted. We need to embrace what was happened, rethink the way forward, and take those steps that will help us continue with education. You see, it's not face-to-face education that is the normal. It's education. And I think we need to be creative. I think we have technologies, which is what I learned here over a period of 3 months. The amount of open sources, the technological advances, the resources that are out there, it does make for online or some type of virtual education a lot easier than at least when I was going to primary school. My God, we didn't even have cell phones at that, nothing. So the challenges were enormous. So I don't know that, let me put it this way, I hope that we'll all be serious partakers and not just be led into processes that we need. We deserve explanations. I think a school in Pachacan, for example, primary school, may be able to do things in such unique ways that is great for them. And a school here in Belize will have create different ways of what works. It's not one size fits all. I think that's my biggest consideration. There is no one size fits all in this situation.
And I'm glad you said that, because that takes me to a paper that you produced looking at the current situation with COVID-19 in Belize. And one of the things that you clearly articulated is the fact that, and I'm just going to read from it, it's saying liberation from a culture, it cannot be political expediency as usual. Development is not accidental, but it is purposeful and a thoughtful process that should keep all Belizeans first. Diversity is nature's way to ensure survival. Economic diversity has always been a good thing. Liberation from a culture that fosters a dependence to one that promotes empowerment and independence of people. We need to awake from our slumber and recognize that oppression and corruption are no longer afraid of the light. So, of course, that was just a small part of what you penned, but I think it's interesting to have this as a part of the conversation now. Fermin, where we are in a position that we are in a state of emergency, we are dependent on health officials to inform us, on leaders to make decisions for us, on the oversight committee to make decisions on our behalf. You're bringing home what I think is a really important point, that we cannot lose the will to be able to be represented. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, Marlene. Historically, there are always these benchmarks that have served to really have people think different, that brought about the changes in think, the changes in policy. I am talking universally.
Yeah.
That have made our world a little better place. I'm sure I'm not alone in the thinking that there is a substantial shift that needs to be made in our culture, in our cultural thinking. We need to be more proactive. I'll be the first to say that we need to wake up. I mean, I think about this. It's like 1 minute you're swimming in wealth, swimming in money, and 3 months down the road, it's like you're flat out broke. What should I think? I do not know that the average Belizean is keen or knows the economic gravity in this country. And part of that is our own doing. Not because expenditure is not just expenditure. Some spending is investment. And if you do not invest in things that produce, then this is where we are. I mean, I am old enough to know the significance that agriculture. Actually, I have some education in agriculture. And I was part of that move towards diversification. And then just how life panned out, I turned into social work. But I know and I appreciate the value of diversifying. I think our culture. Let me reword this thing. I actually am very happy that people. I'm not anti-wealth. I am happy that people have wherewithal, have means. My issue is that how do we reasonably explain the levels of poverty that we have, which it's not a secret. Year to year, over the last so many years, has continued to increase. That's the issue I have. And I don't know how I would explain myself and actually that paper I wrote it for my students, and I hope that I didn't get too many responses, but I think it's a duty.
Well, we found it very interesting, because it is definitely looking at the decision-making process from a more inclusive standpoint, because we're talking not just about decision makers, but just the masses of people in the country, and how we do have to be aware of why these decisions are being made the way they're being made. I want to touch on one thing before we go. You mentioned the poverty situation in Belize. This year should have been the 2020 census. So the poverty indicator that we use, which we would typically use by standard, is the census from 2010, which had us at about 40% poverty in this country. Yeah. Given the fact that the census was not executed and will be moved to a time after COVID-19, we won't be able to know exactly how poor people were before COVID-19, and we can anticipate that COVID-19 is going to drive more people into poverty. In terms of your perspective on this, is this a loss that we won't have that data before the pandemic?
Well, of course, it's always a loss to not be able to do something so critical as the census. Yeah. I think this pandemic will just magnify. I mean, in every sense, we will see numbers that will stagger us. Yeah. And I think we will, what can I say, Marlene? I think that the numbers won't look good, but maybe the message that I would want to kind of share is that that's not. That is just not an accidental thing. It's really speaks to an inability of us as a nation to be able to take those steps or make those kinds of decisions. And I talk about political expediency. This is not a secret. People historically have done things for political expediency, which frankly doesn't produce anything at a national scale, more than just probably winning an election or something like that. This is not a secret.
Well, I
And,
know you normally chime in on our political commentary as well around election time. And I think you're pointing out something that very few people have missed, that we are, in fact, in the phase right before an election.
which, yes, let me think about this just for a second. I think it's time that we recognize that we are, and I don't want to sound like a complete atheist, but we are the orchestrators of our future. Let me put it that basic way. We need to become more self-reliant. We need to move away from the idea that we think government is there to protect us and to save us. And to, when I think about recovery, of course, there's things that government would need to do to stimulate certain things. But this will be maybe the private sector to drive the changes that will come about. I don't know. I think what I would like to see is people more engaged in those that know different, to put those gears into work and to contribute to a process that can really walk us out of this, and prepare for a future that needs to be bright. In my case, for my grandchildren and every child in Belize. But the same old way of doing things, honestly, Marlene and Isan, it cannot work. It cannot be sustained.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah, well, I think that actually we're out of time, but I think that is such a crucial point to close off on, and a really great reminder to all of us as we start to hear some of the recommendations that are being made, and some of the processes of economic recovery. So I think that that's something we must all remind ourselves of, and we appreciate you joining us this morning to share that perspective.
You're welcome. I was glad I could contribute.
Right.
Thank you
very
Have
much.
a good day.
And with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And one of the things that Fermin mentioned is about us being able to participate, to pay attention to decisions that are being made.
Yeah.
But a big part of participation means understanding. And so our next segment is actually going to be with financial journalist Kalila Reynolds. Of course, she's a Belizean. She's practicing in Jamaica. But she's going to help us to break down what the introduction of the $30 million US denomination treasury note means for economic recovery. That's coming up after the break. Please stay tuned.